Hi, so welcome to this video on remote administration. We're just going to look at what remote administration is about, its advantages, how we enable it, and issues to do with security around remote administration. So what is remote administration? Basically, remote administration is the ability to manage system from anywhere in the world. So you could actually be in separate buildings but in the same campus, or you could be in the same city but in different streets, or in the same country in different provinces, or even in different continents on earth. So as long as you can access the system from anywhere that is not the physical location where the system is, then that we call remote administration. Now with remote administration, we are traversing a number of networks for us to be able to access our systems. That means we are going through the internet, we're going through wide area networks, we're going to metropolitan area networks, and all those networks have got their own issues to do with security, and therefore making sure that our data is safe as we transmit it across those networks to our systems is very important. And that security is a huge concern around remote administration. We'll look at it a bit later on. So what are some of the advantages that you get from remote administration? Remote administration allows us to have 24-hour access to our systems. So regardless of where you are, if there is a problem with your system or any update that needs to be done to your system at any time, you can do it from wherever you are. So people are able to work from their homes, able to work from coffee shops. They can actually go to a different city for a holiday, and they can actually help where necessary. So it gives employees the flexibility to work anywhere without having to be confined to a specific building. Also, at times you may need expertise that is very far away or that is from another country. There is no need for those people to travel to your country, but they can just actually configure all those systems and do all the necessary updates and configurations, as well as troubleshooting from wherever they are. Then there's also better collaboration across teams. As we are saying, if people are in different cities, if people are from different companies in different worlds, those people can quickly set up a meeting and start working on a solution or on a project, which saves a lot on time and increases or reduces the time to market for a certain product. So how do you enable, or how do you allow a computer or a server to be accessed from a remote location? So it depends on what kind of system it is. Mainly the system could be a Unix-based system, Linux, AIX, or it could be a Windows system. So one of the things you could do is to change settings. Like on a Windows, you actually have to enable remote access to that computer. So you go to the settings, then you choose the enable remote access to this computer setting. And then usually on Linux machines, you may have to open ports as well. On Windows, you also can open ports on your firewall. And the same goes for Linux as well, where you may have to open ports such as ports for FTP, ports for SSH, ports for TFTP, all those ports may need to be opened for people to be able to access the services of that computer remotely. Then some machines may require certificate authentication, where certificates are used to authenticate, where certificates exchange information and make sure that they're all from a trusted source and they've been allowed access to that computer. So if your computer does not have the certificates that match or that can be decoded by the server, then you cannot access that server. Then also we can enable certain user accounts to be able to access remotely. So once you enable a computer to be accessed remotely, it does not mean that everybody now is supposed to access it remotely. So you can say only 2 people with certain permissions are allowed to access it remotely, and the rest of you people can only access it when you're physically in the building where the computer is or on the local area network. Then there's also desktop sharing. So sometimes you may not necessarily have settings on the computer where you're enabling remote access, but someone can actually share their desktop, and then it can be accessed remotely to do some configurations. So some machines may not have explicit remote access configuration set on them. They cannot be accessed remotely, but via the desktop of another person, they can actually be accessed by someone who is from anywhere in the world, and they can do any configurations there. Another issue around enabling remote access on computers, you have to do with the roles and permissions that are given to the various systems or people who access those systems. So you'll find that there is network level access roles and permissions, domain level access roles and permissions, as well as application level access roles and permissions. So at network level, it may be defined that certain people can only access a certain VLAN on the network at a specific time, and also maybe even though they are remote, it could be at a specific location as well. Or some people may have full access to the whole network from anywhere else, or some people may only be allowed to access specific IP addresses on the network. So those are different levels of security that are being put on the network to make sure that when people are accessing the system remotely, they are not going to be accessing things that are not up to them, that they are not privileged to, and also to reduce the attack footprint that may occur in the event that somebody tries to attack you through that remote connection. Then they will not be able to access your whole network, and therefore their damage will be limited. Then there's domain level access. So domain level access could give you access to only machines of a certain company. Let's say it's a group that has got many subsidiaries, and it also has various domains. So instead of giving access to someone to the whole network, you just say, you know what, you have got control over the computers of this company, but you cannot control the computers of this company, even though they are sharing a one super domain. So domain level access is actually important and helps in making sure that your systems are secured. Then there is application level access. This is where people are now either they are just allowed to access that application, or even within that application, only specific tasks can be performed remotely, and the rest of them will have to be performed within the local area network. So you could say maybe the deletion of users cannot be done remotely, but will need you to actually be in the same network. But the creation of users can actually be done remotely. So these are the various levels of remote access roles and permissions that can be put on a system, and they'll also differ depending on the company, the requirements, and the project that is being worked on. Now, coming to some of the tools that we can use to remotely access computers. With Windows, I think the main tool is the remote desktop connection. So there is the native remote desktop connection tool that comes with Windows operating systems, but there are also other tools that have been created that allows you to do remote access to computers. Then with Linux, usually most people try to access Linux computers, they use SSH connections. So you can use various SSH clients like PuTTY, like the SSH client itself, and various other clients, MobaTerm, MobaXterm. There are also clients that allow you to do SSH connections to a server. You can also do a GUI-based connection using the VNC connection on Linux, but that one is rarely used by a lot of people, as most Linux administrators will access their systems via the command line. Then you can also access systems using tools like TeamViewer for desktop sharing, TeamViewer, AnyDesk. Those tools or solutions can actually allow you to also do remote connections to any other system, including the Windows and Linux systems from wherever you are. Now, when it comes to the security issues around remote access, we need to be able to see how a person is going to access the systems remotely. How do we make sure that there is no information that's going to be lost in between, and the information is safe as it crosses the various networks? So for remote connections, there could be LAN access, where you could say only this system can be accessed within the LAN, even though it may be remotely. So you could have a building or an office that is made up of multiple buildings. So that one can allow remote access within the same LAN. And then there's also internet access via the internet, where you could be in different cities or different countries, and you allow people to access the systems via the internet. Now, while that is very possible, it is also not very safe, because over the internet, there is a lot of people who could spoof the information, or people who could actually attack you via those connections. So what do you do? When you're now accessing the systems via the internet, you introduce what are called VPNs, Virtual Private Network Access. So with VPNs, what you're now trying to do is to say, I am going through the internet, but I've created a tunnel in the internet where no one can actually access my information. So within this tunnel, no one has access to it except me, and only my information flows within this tunnel. So with VPN access, what you're basically doing is you're shutting out everyone and everything else and creating a tunnel of information transfer that is specific to you. And so you'll find that with a lot of companies that have got remote access, the use of VPNs is very, very key, and it's used widely. So a VPN basically creates a tunnel on the internet or in any other network that secures your information or the information flowing through it, and no one can actually get that information or do any attacks. So what are the security issues to consider around remote access? You'll find that with VPNs, what you're trying to avoid are man-in-the-middle attacks. So man-in-the-middle attacks are basically attacks of your information is coming from point A. As it flows through the network, there is someone who is actually taking your information and reading it before it reaches the other end. So this is what we call the man in the middle. He's in the middle, or she's in the middle, taking your information, and then they can either forward it as this, or they can make changes to your information before it gets to the other end. And then there are also phishing attacks that could happen. So phishing attacks happen when people try to find information through maybe social engineering to say, what are the passwords? What kind of systems do you use on your remote sessions? What kind of IP addresses? What's the range of your IP addresses? How do you use it? Who sets your passwords? How do you set your password? Anyone who's trying to get information that could allow them to access your network are actually performing a phishing attack. Then there's also credential management by employees, where employees will have to find ways of making sure that their usernames and passwords that they use to remotely access their systems are not stored in places where they are easily retrieved by other people, as well as they are not put in places which allow automatic access to the remote computers. For example, people could store passwords on their machines, right? So it could be a connection that is now automatic, where the moment you open the machine, you've got an internet connection and you press connect, it automatically connects because the person has saved the password. That in itself can be a security threat and a security risk to the business. So credential management is something that needs to be trained to the employees, to let them know that they need to be able to manage their credentials in a very, very strict way. So these are some of the issues that you may have to consider when it comes to remote access to computers. But the key thing is, this is not all the information that you can get out there, but this is the information that's pointing you in the direction of what you're supposed to know as far as remote administration is concerned, what you're supposed to consider as far as security, as well as roles and permissions of people are concerned in as far as remote administration is concerned. So thank you very much for watching, and hope you have learned something.